They always said silence speaks volumes. But what happens when that silence is finally broken by the very man the world was told to forget? A father, publicly humiliated, globally ridiculed, ghosted by his own daughter. A daughter who rose from California sunshine to royal spotlight, rewriting the story of her origins along the way. But now, after years of painful silence, Thomas Markle has broken that silence, and what he's revealed could shatter everything Meghan Markle has built. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. You think you know the story. A struggling biracial actress, raised by a single mother, who clawed her way through Hollywood rejection until she married into the British monarchy. That's what we were told. That's what Oprah's cameras captured. That's what the Netflix documentaries sold us. But beneath the polished speeches, the pearly smiles, and the glimmering tiaras, there's a version of the truth that was buried. On purpose. By design. And Thomas Markle? He's done being quiet. This isn't just about broken family ties anymore. It's about timelines that don't add up, documents that went missing, records that were altered, and a birthday that, according to her own father, isn't even real. You heard that right. Thomas Markle now claims his daughter wasn't born in 1981, as the world believes, but in 1976. And he's daring Meghan to prove otherwise. Let that sink in for a moment. That's a 5-year discrepancy. 5 years that, if true, would mean Meghan was 39, not 34, when she married Prince Harry. 5 years that change how we view her Hollywood career, her high school years, even her motherhood timeline. And if it's a lie, it's not just a fib about age. It's a calculated reinvention. So the question is, why lie? Why would Meghan Markle go so far as to erase her own history? What was she trying to hide? And why is Thomas Markle now stepping forward, after all this time, to expose it? This isn't just some family squabble. This is the rewriting of identity, the weaponization of narrative, and the possible manipulation of a royal court, a global audience, and yes, even a father who once paid her bills and watched her rehearsals in a tiny LA apartment. And here's where it gets even more disturbing. There may have been a deliberate effort to set Thomas up, to paint him as an opportunist, a fame-hungry trader who sold out his daughter to tabloids for a few $1,000s. But according to new testimony, leaked emails, and the man himself, it may have been Meghan pulling the strings all along. A dirty ruse, Thomas calls it. One that not only smeared his name, but cemented her own sainthood in the court of public opinion. But the cracks are showing now. The world has started asking harder questions. Like why Meghan never released her full, unredacted birth certificate. Or why multiple classmates have come forward claiming she was always older than she claimed. Or why casting directors remember her being around 30 back in the early 2000s, when her official age should have placed her in her early 20s. And just when you think it's all hearsay and speculation, Thomas drops the folder. The folder he's kept locked away in his modest home in Rosarito, Mexico. Inside, photos, forms, letters, a diary, records no one else has seen until now. I didn't want to do this, he says in a grainy video. But she left me no choice. The pain in his voice is raw. He isn't angry, he's broken. A father who watched the world turn against him, who sat alone on the day of his daughter's royal wedding, watching from a hospital bed. A man who says his biggest mistake wasn't speaking to the press, but trusting his daughter to tell the truth. This story matters because it cuts to the core of our cultural moment. In an age of curated identities, Instagram-perfect lives, and carefully crafted public images, we're watching the consequences of truth being treated like a suggestion. What happens when personal branding becomes more important than personal history? When image replaces identity? This isn't just a royal scandal. It's a human one. And now, for the first time, we're going to trace Meghan Markle's origin story. Not the one told by Netflix or Spotify or The Cut, but the one her father swears is real. We'll follow the breadcrumbs from the hospital in Canoga Park, California, to her high school in Los Angeles, through the maze of Hollywood casting records, all the way to the steps of Windsor Castle. Because if Thomas Markle is telling the truth, everything changes. This expose will dig into the real reason Thomas was cut off before the royal wedding. The paparazzi scandal that may have been orchestrated. A timeline of inconsistencies surrounding Meghan's age. Shocking witness claims from people who knew her growing up. Doria Ragland's mysterious disappearances during Meghan's early life. The missing school records, erased photos, and rebranded years. And the question that haunts this entire saga: what is Meghan Markle hiding? And here's what makes this even more chilling. Every time Thomas tried to speak, he says Meghan's team moved to shut him down. Legal letters, PR blackouts, media spin. But this time, he's not backing down. Because he's not just defending his name, he's reclaiming the truth. We'll unpack every claim, analyze every contradiction, cross-reference the public story with the private records. And by the end of this video, you'll have to ask yourself, was Thomas Markle really the villain in this story? Or was he the first casualty of a carefully planned PR war? This is more than family drama. This is about what happens when the truth becomes inconvenient, when history gets edited, pixelated, and re-uploaded for fame. And the deeper we dig, the more chilling the picture becomes. Because if Thomas is right, then Meghan Markle may have rewritten not just her own story, but her father's, her family's, and an entire institution's understanding of who she really is. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. They said he sold her out. But what if the truth is, he was silenced before he could even speak? Let's rewind the tape. Picture this. It's 2018. The world is buzzing with royal wedding fever. Meghan Markle, the glamorous American actress with a Cinderella arc, is about to marry Prince Harry. The palace is tight-lipped. The tabloids are hungry. And in the middle of this storm stands an aging man in Rosarito, Mexico. A father, pacing the floor, phone in hand, ignored by the very daughter he's about to give away to royalty. Or so he thought. Thomas Markle Sr. wasn't just the absent father painted by the press. No, he was a man who, for most of Meghan's life, had been there. Through dance recitals, school lunches, driving her to auditions, paying for her expensive private schooling when Doria couldn't. Yet in the lead-up to the wedding, his calls suddenly weren't being returned. Why? And here's where things get weird. The media was saturated with stories. Thomas Markle stages paparazzi photos. Thomas Markle fakes heart attack. Thomas Markle uninvited to royal wedding. The narrative was brutal and precise. This man is unstable. He embarrassed the royal family. He betrayed his daughter. But did he? Because behind the headlines was a man who had, up until that point, barely said a word publicly. No exclusive interviews. No book deals. No red carpets. Just a few confused text messages, one humiliating incident with staged photos, and a man stuck in a hospital while the world turned on him. So here's the question we should all be asking. If Thomas Markle was truly the villain, why was he silent for so long? Let's go back further. In early 2018, just months before the royal wedding, Thomas says he began receiving strange phone calls. At first, they were pleasant, checking in, asking about his health. But then they became strategic. Phrases like, "It's best if you stay out of the spotlight," and "Let Kensington Palace handle this." One call reportedly came from someone claiming to represent Meghan's team. According to Thomas, they urged him to stay quiet, avoid interviews, and trust them to manage everything. But the silence wasn't peace. It was control. He was told not to speak to the press. Yet the press had already formed a narrative. That he was unstable. That he was chasing attention. That he was unreliable. It wasn't long before the whispers turned into screams. The Daily Mail published the infamous staged paparazzi photos. Images of Thomas reading about Meghan on a computer, looking at royal books, getting fitted for a suit. The public was furious. He betrayed her, they cried. But no one asked the obvious question. Why would a man who wanted to walk his daughter down the aisle risk ruining it all for a few bucks? And that's when the real silencing began. In interviews much later, Thomas would reveal that he received a warning from someone inside Meghan's circle after those photos dropped. Not a legal threat, not an official letter, but a warning. You've caused enough damage. Keep your mouth shut. He says he tried to reach Meghan. He texted. He emailed. He called. Nothing. Days later, news broke that Thomas had suffered a heart attack. He says he was in the hospital, alone, confused, afraid. Meghan didn't visit. Harry didn't call. He was informed through media statements that he would no longer be attending the wedding. And just like that, he was out. No explanations. No clarifications. No second chance. Then came the headlines. Dozens of them. Meghan's father betrays her. Royal wedding scandal. Thomas Markle sells out daughter. Sold out. Let's be real. Who was selling what? While Thomas sat recovering in a hospital room, royal aides issued formal press releases about Meghan walking herself down the aisle. Her star rose. Her independence was celebrated. A feminist icon, rising above family dysfunction. The world clapped. But the father? He faded into the shadows. Branded a liability. Muted. And here's where the silence gets even darker. Several media outlets began to dig into Thomas's past, not to understand him, but to destroy him. Tabloids suddenly had access to decades-old divorce filings. Reports painted him as erratic, unfit, and obsessed with fame. Yet no one paused to ask, why now? Who was feeding these stories? According to one former palace staffer, speaking off the record, there were meetings held specifically about media strategy regarding Thomas. The goal was clear: damage control. Make him the scapegoat. Isolate him from the royal narrative. Discredit him before he ever had the chance to speak. But Thomas didn't lash out. He didn't sue. He didn't leak. He didn't write a tell-all. He went quiet. Because despite everything, he still loved his daughter. In interviews years later, Thomas would say, "I wanted to protect her, even when she didn't protect me." That's what fathers do. But silence is a funny thing. When someone stays quiet for too long, their image becomes a canvas, one that others can paint however they like. And Meghan's team? They painted a masterpiece. In the infamous Oprah interview, Meghan claimed she hadn't spoken to her father in years. She suggested he betrayed her trust. She said she couldn't imagine doing to her own children what her father had done to her. The world sympathized. But Thomas? He watched it alone. In Mexico, heartbroken, and still silent. Until now. Because recently, Thomas has started talking. Not ranting, not raging, but calmly, deliberately, setting the record straight. And what he's revealing, it's not just a defense. It's a revelation. He says he didn't betray Meghan. He was set up. He claims the paparazzi scandal was orchestrated. Not entirely by him, but with the knowledge of people around Meghan. He says he has proof that contradicts key moments in Meghan's official story, especially around her age, her upbringing, and even her relationship with him. And perhaps most chilling of all, he claims he was told to disappear before the royal wedding, not to avoid scandal, but to allow Meghan to reframe her narrative without interference. Let that sit for a second. Because this isn't just a story about a broken father-daughter bond. It's a story about manipulation, about media weaponization, and about what happens when one voice is erased while the other becomes royalty. So the real question is, what was so dangerous about Thomas Markle's truth that it had to be silenced? Because in the next chapter, we'll explore how Meghan's public image, the one that charmed the world, may have been carefully constructed from a version of her life that left some people and some facts behind. And one of those facts might be her real date of birth. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Now let's go deeper. Because here's the part most people missed. Thomas Markle didn't go looking for the spotlight. The spotlight came crashing down on him. Ask yourself this. If you were suddenly the father of the most talked about woman on earth, would you be ready for that level of scrutiny? For photographers outside your window, reporters knocking on your door, drones flying overhead? Thomas wasn't. He was a retired lighting director living quietly in a coastal town near the California-Mexico border. He lived modestly, quietly, alone. And then, overnight, his name became international currency. You think paparazzi just found him in Mexico? No. They were tipped. Someone wanted him found. But not to help him, to bait him. Let's talk about those photos. The infamous staged paparazzi shots that became the breaking point. According to Thomas, a man approached him under the guise of helping him improve his public image. This man promised a soft reintroduction, a few harmless photos to show he was supportive of the wedding. Nothing shady, nothing exploitative. Just some smiling shots of a proud father doing some reading, browsing the internet, getting measured for a suit. Harmless, right? Wrong. Within days, the photos were everywhere, and the narrative was locked in. Thomas Markle, greedy, manipulative, disloyal. What no one mentioned. The man who arranged those photos had links to British media contacts. And when those images exploded online, Thomas didn't make millions. He made just a few $100s. Chump change for what became the excuse to erase him from Meghan's life. But here's where it gets chilling. Thomas says he called Meghan after the backlash. apologized, explained himself. And do you know what he got in return? Nothing. Silence. Then a text. Cold. Formal. Distant. He was no longer welcome. No second chance. No compassion. Just a digital lockout from the woman who once called him her best friend. But it doesn't stop there. Thomas claims he was then contacted by intermediaries. People who didn't give names. People who said things like, "It would be best if you didn't speak anymore. Let her team handle this. You've done enough damage." That's not concern. That's a muzzle.